Welcome to the chat. This is Jack Spillane, and this is the second part of a two-part interview on the abductions that have been taking place since President Trump took office in January, the abductions in New Bedford. I'm calling them abductions. You can call them arrests or detainees or whatever you want to call them. People are disappearing off the streets, particularly in the Central American community. My guests today are Adrian Ventura, the founder of Centro Comunitario de Trabajadores, and Lisa Maya Knauer, who also was a co-founder and is an anthropologist and professor at UMass Dartmouth and a consultant for CCT. Also with us this afternoon is Kevin Andrade, who will be translating for us for Adrian from the Spanish. Welcome to all.
Thank you very much, Jack.
Good
Great to be with
afternoon.
you.
I think it's fair to say that CCT has been the center of Central American and Guatemalan activism these last 18 years since it was founded in the wake of the Bianco raid. But even though the Bianco raid was a big deal, Adrian, you worked there at the time, I don't think that we had seen anything these past 18 years like we're seeing this year. Is this different, Adrian, than what we've seen before?
Digamos que el Centro Comunitario de Trabajadores había sido un foque, un centro de actividad para la comunidad centroamericana desde su fundación como resultado de la redada Bianco en 2007. Pero estas redadas son diferentes y tienen un impacto diferente. ¿Eso es cierto, Adrián?
Sí, gracias. Esto es redada, porque en ese momento yo vi la crueldad para un grupo mayor. Entonces, esta segunda redada de esta administración es como otra sobrevivencia, como que estamos recordando nuevamente el inicio de centro comunitario.
So that was cruelty inflicted on one large group. What we're seeing in this second round of operations by ICE, by this administration, Adrian said, is, bringing people back to remembering the roots of CCT.
And what were those?
¿Y qué son esas raíces para la organización CCT?
Pues desde que fundamos CCT, pues nos dimos cuenta de que era importante, o lo que decimos, es una respuesta de esa redada que pasé anteriormente, porque habían tantas violaciones de derechos humanos, derechos laborales, en eso entonces esa es la razón que fundamos CCT, una respuesta. Y los abusos continúan.
So CCT was founded as a result of the abuses they experienced at the time of the raid for civil rights and for labor rights, and that those abuses continue to be ongoing. So they are continuing their advocacy.
Just human rights. Human rights.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Lisa. I just want to say I'm really happy that Adriana is speaking in Spanish tonight and Kevin's translating, because it is a chance for our Central American viewers to see this in Spanish and to hear what's going on and what the media is trying to tell people about it in their first or second language. So very good that we are in Spanish. Kevin, I'd like to ask Adrian. Adrian, you were a community organizer in Guatemala during the war. Is what we're seeing in New Bedford similar to the kinds of authoritarian things that you saw in Guatemala at that time?
Adrián, cuando vivías en Guatemala, era organizador para su comunidad. Él quería saber si lo que estamos viendo ahora en New Bedford te hace recordar los tácticos autoritarios del régimen en Guatemala, de tu memoria.
Sí, eso es verdad.
Ujú.
Eso es verdad, porque por eso me da mucha tristeza cuando yo vi estas redadas violentas. Entonces, a mí se me vino en el pensamiento cuando yo era niño, estamos hablando de 10 a 12 años. cuando el militarismo en Guatemala, el ejército, la patrulla, los paramilitares, actuaron de esa manera.
So this is bringing me back even as far back as to when I was 10 or 12 years old. Uh, the militares, the military authorities in Guatemala were acting in a very similar fashion to what we're seeing now.
Wow. That's
La razón es que ellos usan violencia, lo utilizan, lo utilizan como la punta del iceberg o están dando un mensaje que ellos van a continuar haciendo eso. O sea, ellos están haciendo eso para enviar mensaje a todos los migrantes de que son capaces de hacer esa clase de tortura.
So the violence is part of the message. It's the tip of the iceberg, the tip of the spear, so to speak. It's meant to send a message to immigrants that we are capable of doing this, so you better do what we're telling you to do.
Y lo han logrado,
And
por-
they've achieved that.
porque a mí, cuando pasó con nuestra compañera Marilú, porque yo lo vi, yo estuve en ese rato. Y estuve grabando, pero yo boté ese live porque mucho bullying de mucha comunidad. Entonces, a mí pues me afectó casi 2 semanas, me, me traumó pues. Y yo no pensaba si estaba en Estados Unidos o un país en Centroamérica.
So I'm recalling the moment with Medi Lou, which is the raid that where the ICE agents broke the window, then took Juan Francisco Mendez into custody. I was live streaming that moment. I was there, and I had to cut it because I was getting a lot of bullying in the comments section. And I just, you know, I felt very traumatized. It really affected me for the next 2 weeks. And it even made me stop and think, am I in the US or am I back in Central America now?
amazing. Lisa, with your anthropology background, have you noticed a change in the city since these raids have begun? Have you noticed a change in the way people are acting or behaving?
Well, I think clearly that this, represents, I think it started actually with the election in some ways, right? We had a meeting at CCT. We have weekly meetings every Wednesday, and we have been talking to people. Obviously, nobody knew exactly what the outcome of the election was going to be beforehand, but trying to prepare people because the fear existed prior to the election that if Trump came into power a second time, that he was going to try to carry through on all of the threats that he had made during the campaign about massive deportations. And so we started to prepare the community about what to do in case they encountered ICE. And then literally the day after the election, we started really doing those, more consistently. I think that it's had sort of a dual effect. On the one hand, I think people are fearful. And I know we've seen, local businesses for people not going out as much, some of the small businesses that have relied upon the Central American community have seen, a little bit of a downturn in their sales and their revenue because people aren't going out as much, are really home to work, to church, and then back home again. There was a drop off in attendance at school when the raid started. So this was, moving to the inauguration and then the beginning. And we really, are talking about February and March is when the raid started. And then they really became much more consistent in the presence of ICE, almost a daily feature of life in New Bedford, particularly in the immigrant neighborhoods, starting in April, that, kids were scared. They were scared they were going to come home and there wasn't going to be a parent there. Just for example, in the case that Adrian mentioned, Juan Francisco Mendez, who thankfully has been released and is home. But, he and his wife, Marilu, had a child, and, the child came home and his father wasn't there. And, over a month without the presence of his father. So we've seen that, and we've seen also the economic impact, because in many cases, the people who have been taken primarily have been men. And while we know that both men and women in the Central American community work, that in many cases it's a two-wage earner household, but we also know that there's a gender difference in earnings and wages, and very often the man is the principal wage earner or has earned a larger salary in families that really are scraping by with two salaries. As we know that rents have been going up in New Bedford, all of the prices have been going up for daily necessities, that there's been a severe economic impact on families and on the community, with people being taken into ICE detention and spending weeks, or in the case of Juan Francisco and some of the others, a month or more in detention.
Adrian, one of the earliest raids we have was at the Guatemala Music and Fashion Store. And I went back and I read the story, and you talked about how the agents were laughing and making it like it was not a big deal. And you'll see. How did that make you feel when they were laughing that way?
Una de las redadas iniciales se ocurrió en la tienda Guatemala Música, y hiciste un comentario de que los agentes estuvieron riéndose durante el proceso de la operación, y él ya quiso saber, quiere saber, ah, cuando pienses en eso, ¿cómo te sientes sobre esa reacción, esa actitud de los agentes de que se ríen en frente a las redadas?
Me siento muy humillado, pues. Me siento muy triste porque nos ven a nosotros, la mayoría de migrantes, como si fuéramos personas no humanas, tal vez por nuestra piel, nuestra etnia y todo eso. Eso es lo que pienso y me da mucha tristeza eso.
It makes me feel humiliated and sad. It makes me think that they don't even see us as human beings, be it for the color of our skin, be it for our ethnicity. It really brings me a lot of sadness.
It seems almost it's like they're trying to send the message, we're in charge, we can do whatever we want.
Es casi como si quisieran mandarles un mensaje de que somos nosotros que estamos en cargo y podemos hacer lo que queramos. ¿Eso es cierto?
Exactamente, ellos como que se sienten el dueño del mundo, se sienten los superpoderosos de hacer lo que quieren. Y eso ya viene, nosotros ya venimos imaginando después que entró esta administración.
So yeah, that's exactly it. It's almost like they view themselves as superhuman and able to do whatever they want. But we also kind of thought that was going to happen when we realized this administration was going to come into power.
This gentleman, Andres, I hope I'm pronouncing his name correctly, Andres Collage Olmos. He was one of the painters that was abducted in front of Market Basket. You got the call, Adrian, after he was deported because he had come more than once, and that's a felony. His wife and 12-year-old daughter quickly had to follow him. I think his son stayed. The message seems to be, we're going to get the others to self-deport. Is that how you see it?
En el caso de Adrián Colmar Olmos, uno de los pintadores que fue agarrado en frente del Market Basket hace unos meses atrás, su esposa y sus hijos se sintieron esforzados ir atrás de él en Guatemala después de su deportación. Es como si sea una táctica para presionar a la comunidad para salir de su propia voluntad. ¿Es así que lo ves?
Claro que sí, porque ellos tienen varias estrategias. Deportar al hombre, porque la mayoría que han sido deportados actualmente son hombres. Yo creo que hay 2 a 3 mujeres nada más de los 35 que nosotros tenemos en la base. Entonces la táctica es enviar a los hombres para que las mujeres son los que siguen, porque ellos, o sea, nosotros los hombres que mantenemos pagando la renta, los biles, dando la comida y todo. Entonces, ya como dicen por ahí, quitando agua al pez se muere, ¿no? Entonces, esa es la táctica de ellos.
So yeah, absolutely, it's part of their strategy there because the men are the chief breadwinners. Um, of the 35 people we have in the CCT database, the light has been able to confirm 31 so far. To about two or three have been women. So absolutely, this is an attempt to pressure people to leave because the main source of income is not there. Yes.
Lisa.
So I just wanted to add that I think there was a lot of discussion about the policy of family separation, which we saw carried out at the border during the first Trump administration. And I think what we are seeing now is that this is family separation of a slightly different kind, taking one member of the family and arresting them, sending them into ICE custody, in some cases, arresting them violently, as we saw with the case of another set of arrests that took place before Juan Francisco Mendez down on Vial Street, where, two adult men who were the guardians for some young people who are still here, were taken into ICE custody. So it's another form of family separation, or as Adrian mentioned, and Jack had discussed in that question about the Colah Olmos family, that if you send one person, if you deport one person and their family is here, people don't want to be separated, right? They want to keep their family together. That's kind of the goal. That's why when one family member immigrates to the United States, very often the others will follow if they haven't come together. So this is a different form of family separation, but it really is just, I'm trying to think of the correct analogy. And I think also just wanted to underscore that, CCT, along with other organizations, such as the CEDC and Mujeres Victoriosas, whom you interviewed last week, have been trying to support the families. And we do have a GoFundMe. If you look for Centro Comunitario de Trabajadores or Adrian Ventura on GoFundMe, we are raising money to help support the families, to help support the children. People need, food, they need clothing, they need help paying their rent, their bills. And so we are really trying to, and all of that money, except for, whatever percentage GoFundMe takes for processing the donations, all of that goes directly to the families. This is not money that is going to the organization or to any of us. It really goes directly into the pockets of the people who need it the most.
I'd just like to say the Immigrant Assistance Center has also been very involved. As far as the GoFundMe goes, that makes me think of the story we had in the light today about the 19-year-old girl who's taking care of her cousins and siblings now that her parents are not here, and she is living off the money that the CCT and other organizations have given her. So those GoFundMes are working. Um, how is it going in terms of, I know early on we had a story that the consul was overwhelmed as far as giving information about papers to people. Last week, Ondine told us that many people have not gotten lawyers. Adrian, are people getting the help they need, whether that's legal help or consular help?
Hace unos meses publicamos una historia sobre el hecho de que la gente ha tenido dificultades en acceder a los servicios del consulado, y también la abogada de inmigración Ondine Sniffin la semana pasada dijo en nuestra charla aquí que hay mucha gente que ha tenido dificultades en encontrar abogados para argumentar sus casos. Y desde su perspectiva, el pueblo ha sido capaz de encontrar la ayuda que se necesita en este momento.
No, no porque sinceramente nosotros acá le referimos a muchas personas. Por ejemplo, tenemos somos miembro de una organización en Boston como MIC. Referimos personas a ellos, referimos abogados privados, pero los abogados acá también tienen muchos casos y ellos dicen claramente que ya no tenemos capacidad para poder ayudar tanta gente, porque ahora están buscando más abogados. Entonces nosotros tenemos que pedir favor a ellos que den una charla, qué puede hacer la gente para que se salve de una u otra manera.
So no, people have been able to get the help they need, and we're members of an organization up in Boston, Meek, and we're able to, sometimes refer people to cases up there. But in our area, everybody's overwhelmed, including the lawyers. So sometimes we just have to go our way and ask people to come and give general conversations. General talks to the community about what they can do to protect themselves and be prepared in this current moment.
Kevin, David Aarons has a question that he's written in Spanish. I wonder if you can read that and then translate for David Aarons is a local activist who is on the chat.
Yeah.
And before we get to that, I'll just ask Lisa, why is it important for what is important for Americans to know about the situation in Guatemala itself, in particular the situation with Mayans in Guatemala? People are often fond of saying things like, "Well, I came legally; they should come legally." What do Americans need to know about what's been happening in Guatemala these last couple decades?
Well, we don't have time for a full history lesson. And like many of my friends and colleagues in Guatemala and here, the story begins 500 years ago, or actually 501 years ago, right? 1524 was the Spanish invasion. So there's been, a long history of displacement, of marginalization, of moving people off their land, of wars that were carried out during the colonial period. And, when the state as an independent entity was founded in the 19th century, that the indigenous population was basically considered not even fully citizens, second-class citizens. And that was carried out, continually through the 20th century. Economically, politically, and otherwise, people were marginalized. And the indigenous population was, kind of confined to rural areas, was discriminated against, lack of funding for education, for infrastructure, for schools, for healthcare. All of those things persisted throughout the 20th century. There was an armed conflict that went on for 36 years. Adrian has spoken about that, which really was declared by the United Nations to be a genocide. Most of the victims of the over 250,000 deaths that have been documented, over 85% of the victims were indigenous.
And we've also had more recently a lot of exploitation by American fruit companies and also the environmental disasters connected to climate change that have driven people off their land.
Well, so the United Fruit Company, that was in what led to the coup against Jacobo Arbenz in 1954. And now that there are not only American, but Canadian and Spanish and other multinationals doing mining, a lot of extractivist industries in Guatemala, palm oil extraction, all of these are things that encroach upon indigenous lands. And there has been a pattern of threats, of terror, of assassinations, of killings of leaders of indigenous communities that have resisted. And even though there is a new government, a more progressive government in Guatemala, Bernardo Arévalo, to many people's surprise, won the presidency in the 2023 elections, but almost didn't get inaugurated. I was there during the period of his inauguration in January of 2024, and it was because of the mobilization of the indigenous communities to put pressure on the government that was in power and about to leave in order to force the Congress to actually recognize Arévalo and to allow him to be inaugurated. However, even though he is a more progressive leader, he has limited control. And so still many of the forces that have been oppressing and discriminating against, and the elites in power in Guatemala, they're still there. The military hasn't gone anywhere. The police haven't gone anywhere. The people who control the money in Guatemala haven't gone anywhere. And so he is unable to really bring about significant reforms. And the attacks on indigenous communities are still happening. I mean, we get information about this, almost daily or weekly from different communities in different parts of Guatemala that are opposing mining companies, that are opposing other hydroelectric dams and other things that cause a lot of environmental damage. And so the people who are coming here are coming from, and most of the Guatemalans who come to the United States are indigenous.
Okay, I'm just going to, just because we have an hour format, then I'm going to ask everyone, including myself, to try to be concise with our answers because we can take up all the time on one question, and I have a lot of questions I want to get to. Kevin, could you ask the same question to Adrian in maybe a briefer manner? Why are people coming from Guatemala? Why do they need to come?
Adrián, ¿qué son los motivos para los guatemaltecos para venir aquí a los Estados Unidos?
Tal vez el 60% venimos huyendo, buscando la libertad. Por ejemplo, lo que acaba de decir Lisa es exactamente nosotros. Por ejemplo, mi papá tenía fincas, tenía caballería de terreno, pero cuando pasó esa guerra, el ejército, el gobierno, se los quitó a ellos y se lo dio a los narcotraficantes. Ahora el terreno de nosotros le pertenece a los traficantes en una población bien grande. Entonces, ¿cómo nos sacaron? Con armas, bombas y todo, y tuvimos que salir a refugiarnos en varios lugares de un país que era de nosotros. Nos quedamos en la calle sin nada y nosotros somos los propietarios, somos los nativos en ese país. Y esa es la razón, cuando no tenemos nada, tenemos que buscar dónde salir.
So about 60% of us left because of the violence and in search of freedom. My own family, my father was a horse trader and we had a lot of land. And when the war happened, the militares, the military came in, seized our land and gave it to the to drug traffickers. And those are the people who own the land now. We are the native people of the land, but we were living in the streets out there, so we had to find a place to go.
Right. And the numbers that they allow in from Guatemala, that the United States allows in from Guatemala, are very low. So it's not easy to come legally.
Entonces, pero los números que permiten que los Estados Unidos permite a la entrada desde Guatemala, I'm sorry, Jack, repeat the question.
Well, I just want to ask, do people come without papers because it's impossible to come with papers because they just don't have that many slots for people without papers from Guatemala, unskilled people?
So, entonces, hay gente que vienen sin documentos y eso es porque no hay mucho espacio, según las políticas del gobierno estadounidense, dado a los guatemaltecos para venir acá.
Definitivamente no. Nosotros somos la comunidad más grande en Guatemala, pero ahí hay un grupo que solo le da la oportunidad a un grupito aplicar. Cuando uno aplica en la embajada, por ejemplo, yo fui a la embajada de Estados Unidos allá para aplicar algo. Inmediatamente me vieron el rostro y me sacaron, ni siquiera me escucharon. Entonces, por lo menos nos hubieran dado una oportunidad. Entonces, mire, a mí me da mucha pena, mucha tristeza cuando yo veo cada vez que nos niegan algo. Hubo un momento que en mi mente decía, ¿por qué Dios no nos escucha a nosotros? ¿Por qué? Y eso me pone muy, muy, muy triste y enojado a la vez.
There absolutely aren't enough slots given to Guatemalans to come here. And there's also an added element of discrimination. When I go, like, they only give it to a select group of people. When I attempted to come in with documentation, I went to the embassy and they wouldn't even they wouldn't even give me a shot. They saw my face and immediately said no. This is something that really saddens me.
Lisa, you want to add something here?
Yeah. Oh, just one clarification. He wasn't asking for a visa. He went to try to resolve. So you have various things that you need to take care of at the United States Embassy. So it was something else that he was trying to do. I just wanted to add that just the obstacles of even getting to the embassy, which is in Guatemala City. So for someone from a rural area, you have to get there. You have to stay overnight. You have to get online. So there are economic obstacles. There are obstacles. I mentioned the poor road conditions, the lack of transportation. It's a huge journey to get to the US Embassy and to get an appointment and to pay the money for the medical examination that you need. So you're talking about spending several hundred US dollars, like 400 or 500, I don't know what it is now, 500 or 600 US dollars just for the paperwork. And whether or not and you don't get a refund if they turn your application down. So it's a huge, burden for people, whose gross income for a year might be $500, right, converted to US currency. So there are many, many obstacles, not just the limited number of visas.
Okay. So David Evans has now translated into English what he was trying to ask, and that basically is what are Massachusetts officials doing to fight back? We're talking about state officials like the governor, the legislature. Lisa?
Well, certainly the governor has made some statements about this. And individuals in the legislature have made statements. We've had some very positive responses from our representatives, Tony Cabral and Chris Hendricks, who have gone to the Guatemalan consulate, who have, tried to do what they can for people who are in detention. There was a meeting about a week and a half ago that the governor held with representatives of many immigrant serving organizations. CCT was one of the maybe 17 or 18 organizations that were there. It was more of a listening session. I think people had posed some specific concerns and demands of the governor. I don't know actually how much control they have in terms of actually doing anything about the activities. I know they've asked for more information. Both the governor and Mayor Wu, where there have been a number of raids in Boston as well, have asked for more information about ICE activities. I don't know that Mayor Mitchell has made that kind of request for ICE about details of what they're doing, but I think that they've been stonewalled.
Yeah, I kind of wish that they would do more like the California senator or the New York mayoral candidate who went to these incidents and spoke up. That yes, they did get handcuffed and detained, but sometimes you have to make a media spectacle to get the attention as to what exactly is going on.
Yeah, no, we haven't seen anything like that. So I think it's been, I would say, kind of lukewarm. And I don't know if, Adrian or other people in the community have a different sense of what we might. I don't know that we have a lot of expectations. It would be great if they did something, but my expectations are fairly limited about what our elected officials are going to do about this.
Adrian, how traumatized were people when they saw the video taken by the lights Gerardo Beltran of the windshield being the window being shattered by the ICE agent who was not in uniform? Are people afraid that that's going to happen again? That it seemed to me that would be the kind of thing that would just traumatize people.
Adrián, ¿qué fue el impacto del video de la operación en que el ICE agarró al Juan Francisco Méndez en que rompieron la ventana de su coche para lo detener y los agentes no llevaban uniforme? ¿Qué había sido el impacto de este video en la comunidad y qué tan traumatizado está por eso?
Yo creo que eso es lo que me afectó bastante a mí, en primer lugar. Y eso que yo lo vi, yo estaba ahí atrasito de los carros de las personas. Yo tratando de decir no hagan nada. Ellos me ignoraron a mí principalmente. Entonces, las personas, por ejemplo, lo que yo he escuchado actualmente, si me afectó a mí que yo tengo el valor de sentirme bien feliz de estar en un país democrático, un país con derecho. Pero cuando yo vi eso, yo sentí que estamos en un país de dictador. Y también he escuchado de toda la gente llorando. Hay gente en este momento no ha recuperado ese trauma porque no lo han vivido, no
Ujú.
lo han visto. Son una generación nueva que han escuchado de sus padres en Guatemala, en Centroamérica, pero cuando ellos lo viven decían, sí, lo vivimos. Entonces, yo porque lo viví, ya solo me...
Okay, poor Kevin's going to have a hard time with that.
So,
Okay.
so yeah, so yes, I in the first place, I felt traumatized by that situation. Now, and I lived through. I felt like I'm in a dictatorship, and I'm someone who has always felt happy to live in the U.S. And satisfied that I live in a democratic society. But now we're seeing a younger generation that did not have to live through the Civil War, did not have to live through the levels of violence experienced at that point. They're now experiencing similar levels of violence. So yeah, people are still reeling from that.
Y
I,
al
I
final, y
want to talk a little bit.
pues,
Go ahead, Adrian.
al final, pues, yo he escuchado en este momento personas eh, que no quieren salir de su casa, no van a la iglesia, no van a comprar, ni lavar ropa, porque están asustados de cualquier carro oscuro. Y, o sea que esa es la táctica que usa la inteligencia para intimidar a muchos, pues.
So I mean, since then there are people who haven't left their houses. They don't go out to do laundry. They don't go out to church or even to do shopping because they're terrified of any dark tinted car that goes by them. And this is a part of the strategy being used by the agencies right now.
Yeah, but
Pero hay
certainly
un punto,
people
hay
have to
un,
go out.
hay un punto muy importante que quiero aclarar.
Mhm.
Si estoy bien, yo estoy bien si ellos van a buscar las personas que realmente los que quieren deportar. Ellos están agarrando la gente más vulnerable. Por ejemplo, estamos hablando de la guerra. ¿Cuántos paramilitares están en Providence? ¿Cuántos paramilitares están aquí en New Hampshire, aquí en Vermont? Acá en Massachusetts, ¿cuántos que tienen las manos llenas de sangre? Son paramilitares, han matado a mucha gente, han violado. Incluso yo tengo unas fotos aquí. Pero ellos no lleven eso. Están llevando trabajadores como un chivo expiatorio, nada más. Es una cortina de humo. No están buscando.
I
Aquí
wouldn't I would not have too much of an. I would be okay if they were deporting the real criminals here, but how many ex paramilitaries from Central America are there in Rhode Island, in Vermont, in New Hampshire? I have some pictures here of some of them. Those are not the people they're deporting.
Yeah. I was quite taken, Adrian, by the story of Marilu uh, Domingo Ortiz, Juan Francisco Mendez's wife. After he was taken to New Hampshire, she withdrew into herself and she was not going out. And you had encouraged her to get involved with CCT. I think people think of CCT as a workers' rights group, and it is, but CCT is much more than that in the Central American community. Tell the story about how you helped Mary Lou.
Para el Jack le impactó la historia de Mary Lou de cómo fue que ella se retrasó para sí misma, para vivir su vida eterna después del incidente, y usted fue una de las personas que le encorajaba a involucrarse más en la comunidad. Y hay mucha gente que piensa en el Centro Comunitario de Trabajadores como si fuera un grupo solo enfocado en los derechos laborales, pero realmente es un grupo que tiene una misión mucho más amplia que eso. El Jack quiere que tú desarrolles un poco más la historia de Marilu, cómo fue que la encorajó a entrar, a involucrarse más y cómo es que se enseña la misión de la CCT.
bueno, principalmente nosotros no sacamos a nadie cuando entra por la puerta, pues, y nos llaman. Entonces nosotros, aunque la misión de CCT es laboral, organizar, tomar acciones, pero nosotros, porque aquí en Bedford hay muchas organizaciones muy buenas, apoyan mucho a la comunidad migrante. Immigrant Center, está CDC, Mujeres Victoriosas, hay otros grupos, pero las personas, no sé cuál es la razón, ellos me llaman a las 5 de la mañana, pero yo les digo, pero ustedes tienen que educarse, porque la misión del CCT es educarse, no hacemos otras cosas en educación. Por eso traemos diferentes personas a nuestra organización, como abogado de inmigración, abogados laborales, el gobierno, la policía, que vengan y ellos se tienen. Y ya cuando ellos miren que tienen esos recursos, pues se siguen involucrando.
So, the first thing is that we don't turn anybody away. I get calls at 5 o'clock in the morning very often from people asking for help. And there's we're lucky in New Bedford. We have a lot of really strong organizations that people can turn to. There's us, there's Mujeres Victoriosas, there's the Immigrants Assistance Center, CEDC, many other places they can turn to. You know, our job is not just to organize and help people fight for their labor rights, but also to direct them to resources that they might be able to mobilize more to help their causes.
Lisa, I wonder if you can talk about this also, the role that CCT is playing in the community beyond just helping workers, because it's true. Kevin just listed all the different groups that help that Adrian mentioned, but I think because it is a group founded by a Guatemalan man, that speaks their language, that identifies with their situation, it plays a special role. Am I wrong about that?
No, and I think that it's not just, that Adrian has a long history here, but that the entire leadership of CCT are all immigrant workers, all Central American immigrant workers, Salvadoran, Honduran, Guatemalan. They're all people who have lived the same experience of the community that they are serving. So I think that people really identify and have a lot of confidence in the organization. I want to make one very small correction to Kevin's earlier translation, that it's really about educating people, right? This is something that Adrian really emphasizes, that CCT is about educating people, so educating people about their rights and educating people about resources. And also just to add, to Marilu, who came here and, we sat down, Adrian did, I did, others, worked with her. We helped her record a video that she put out on her own to really, try to get some more help and support. She has come to CCT and she sits at the door at our weekly talks and, takes people's names. So she's really become very active in the organization. Juan Francisco, now that he has been released, has come here a couple of times to, to volunteer. So I think people really feel that kind of connection. So CCT has interfaced with a lot of different institutions in the city, with the schools. We've organized meetings with the school superintendent and parents to talk about issues. CCT has tried to develop alliances with other community organizations. So people really do feel that strong sense of identification with the organization. And of course, it has a special role within the Central American community. But as Adrian said earlier, CCT doesn't discriminate against anybody. We've had people from Equatorial Guinea, the one Spanish-speaking country in West Africa, who have come here. A small number of Equatorial Guinean immigrants in the area have come. Cape Verdeans have come. Puerto Ricans, who are not technically immigrants because we forced citizenship upon them, have come, to CCT. Portuguese, speaking people. So it really is, while it has a very special role and significance in the Central American community, it is really open to people from all communities and has tried to work really to help build bridges between all of these different communities. I don't know if that answers your question, Jack.
Yeah, very much. Adrian, we have not heard much from the employers, the fish houses, the roofers, the restaurants, the childcare, companies. I feel like there is a silence among the business people, the churches, the politicians. The mayor has said that they're not getting enough information, but he hasn't really talked about the humanity and the suffering that's happening. The city council's been invisible, the state reps. Are we disappointed? Do we need more people to speak out?
No hemos oído mucho de los empleadores, o sea de las casas de pez o de compañías de construcción, restaurantes, de cuidado de los niños. Tampoco de los políticos hemos oído mucho. El alcalde no ha hablado mucho sobre la humanidad de la situación. El concejal de la ciudad tampoco ha hablado mucho sobre la situación. ¿Ustedes están un poco decepcionados sobre la reacción de esos sectores?
No solo decepcionados, sino que lo vemos, bueno, nosotros lo vemos en el grupo. Un día discutimos acá con mujeres victoriosas y otras personas, discutimos eso. Siempre nos sentimos excluidos. Para mí es una exclusión porque hay tantas cosas que pasan y todo el mundo calladito.
So we not only feel disappointed in their reaction, but we also feel excluded. You know, we keep asking for action, we keep asking for them to speak, and everybody just quiet.
Yeah, I mean, the fish houses, the recycling companies, they must know what good workers these people are. It's just amazing that they haven't spoken out. I suppose that they're afraid like everybody else.
Me quedo sorpreso de que esas compañías no han dicho nada porque saben de lo tan buenos trabajadores que están en esa comunidad. ¿Por qué tú piensas que no han dicho nada?
Porque ellos, incluso varias compañías, utilizan gorras para intimidar a la gente como ICE. Ellos tienen que aceptar los trabajos. Y varias compañías hemos visitado nosotros en el sur, compañía de pescado, tienen su mesa con la foto de Donald Trump ahí, nuestro presidente, colocados ahí. Incluso para ellos lo que está pasando es normal.
So for like they are out there, even as they're recruiting, they're out there trying to intimidate us. They go around, some of them wearing hats that look like they're ice hats. Some of them are even having tabling with photos of Donald Trump out there. It's really like it's just really a difficult situation right now.
I want to talk before we wrap up a little bit about children and the children of these immigrants and the trauma that they are sustaining. We've had stories by Kevin and others about Juan Francisco Mendez's son stopping eating and other children not wanting to go to school. Lisa, in a situation like this, are children especially vulnerable as their identities are forming?
Yes, I mean, this is something that I think has really, been well documented and noted, by psychologists, sociologists, anthropologists, dating back, children of mixed status families. The child might be a U.S. citizen, the parents are not. The children may or may not be aware of that, right? At a young age, they don't even understand that. So there is this kind of uncertainty. I mean, I remember, on the 10th anniversary of the Michael Bianco raid, talking to the son of one of the people who was in that raid, who is now a U.S. citizen. But 10 years later, her son still, who was 2 years old at the time of the raid, was still kind of reliving that trauma of having come home and not having found his mother, right? And his mother being detained for a number of days. So there is, there are long-term consequences, even for a week, even for 2 weeks, even for a month. This kind of uncertainty really at a very early age can have very lasting, I don't know that we know yet how lasting the trauma is, but certainly things that happen that are dramatic early in childhood are things that can have consequences for years and years. And as I mentioned earlier, there had been a drop off in school attendance. We'll see how things are going to be in the fall. We don't know what's going to happen over the summer in terms of ICE's activities, but if there's going to be a drop off in school attendance, and we know a large percentage of, and this tells you something about the size of the Central American community, that 30 to 35% of the students in New Bedford public schools are classified as Hispanic Latino, which obviously doesn't fit the self-identification of many people of indigenous heritage, but it's how people get classified. So, a third of the school population are children of these immigrants. Many of them US born, not all of them, but many of them US born. People were very concerned about the high school graduation last week and whether ICE was going to show up, because they have been showing up in places like that. I don't think there were any incidents at the New Bedford High School or at the Voc graduation, but certainly that kind of fear and that kind of anxiety on the part of parents and students is something that can shape people for the rest of their lives. So we may be living with the consequences of this for years to come, not just as we're experiencing it now.
Adriana, are people coming to you telling you stories about the trauma on their children? I know that video that Gerardo Beltran took of Juan Mendez's son running toward him, shouting "Papito," and the story that he had stopped eating. Are people particularly worried about their children? Kevin, I think you're muted.
Las historias que la gente te han contado a ti, Adrián, le enseñan mucha preocupación sobre los efectos y la trama que se puede impactar a los hijos suyos.
¿A los hijos míos?
De ellos, de
¿O
ellos
de
mismos.
ellos?
Sí.
Sí, porque lo que yo he escuchado de las madres, porque algunos me llaman y me dicen, yo no sé qué hacer con mi hijo, está traumado, no quiere ir a la escuela. Yo les pregunto cuál es la razón, que tienen miedo a que también ellos son detenidos. Y, por ejemplo, hay varios niños ahora, hay como de 15 a 14 que yo sé que están yendo a un psicólogo para tratar de neutralizarse,
Sí.
pero ellos no entienden por qué su papá ya no regresa a casa.
So I've absolutely been hearing these stories. There are stories of children who aren't eating and stories of children who are refusing to even go to school because they're terrified of what will happen. They're terrified they or their remaining parents will be picked up. I know of about 14, 15 who are currently seeing psychologists in order to um, get to a state of equilibrium mentally regarding this situation, just to be able to function.
So everybody I talk to expects this to keep going, maybe to get even worse, as we see officials now are even being attacked. I know that we have that CCT has given out the cards advising people what to say, asking for their lawyer, saying that they need to know what the charges are. As we go along, Adrian, is there anything new that you are telling to people they should do if they are approached?
Desde que comenzó esta situación, esta onda de operaciones, yo sé que hemos dicho a la persona que estos son tus derechos, usted tiene el derecho de saber, de preguntar cuáles que son los cargos, de quedarse en silencio, pero mientras la situación se ha empeorado y la mayoría de expertos piensan que la situación todavía se vaya a empeorar, um, ¿qué está diciendo a la gente ahora que quizás no estaba diciendo cuando se comenzó todo esto?
Al principio, eh, al principio no creían que lo que va a pasar, la gente. Pero nosotros, como organización y la junta directiva, hablamos bastante cuál es la preparación. La misma junta directiva propone, está Lisa con nosotros haciendo propuesta. ¿Qué se va a hacer? ¿Buscamos un abogado? ¿No buscamos? pero la mayor responsabilidad que teníamos nosotros era la membresía, porque tenemos miembros en cada compañía. Entonces tuvimos que hablar a abogados para que nos den un consejo. ¿Qué podemos hacer? Pero nuestro presidente actualmente, él lo dijo claro, qué es lo que iba a hacer. O sea, esto no es una sorpresa para nosotros, porque él lo que ha dicho, anunciado, lo está haciendo tal como, o sea, es preparar la gente. Pero aún preparar la gente no funciona, porque Juan Francisco,
Yeah. So, at first, people didn't believe this was going to happen. We thought, as an organization, that this was going to happen. So we had several conversations about how to prepare people. We've had conversations about family preparedness, but now people are seeing the reality of the situation. They're seeing that President Trump wasn't lying when he said he was going to carry out mass deportations. We are seeing this happen right before our very eyes. But we're also seeing that, for example, in the case of Juan Francisco, we I mean, all the preparation in the world doesn't seem to be doing very much right now to slow this down.
Before we wrap up, and this has just been fascinating. Thank you both to Adrian and Lisa for helping us understand the reality on the ground. Why don't we do a roundup of how people can help? Um, uh, where are these GoFundMe pages? Is it just a matter of going on the website and looking up Centro Comunitario or Immigrants Assistance Center or Community Economic Development Center? What are the specific ways people can help?
Adriano or Lisa?
Uh, Either
ah,
one.
yo
Well,
quiero
one
responder eso, si puedo.
Yo,
Dígame.
yo lo compartí el link, entonces está en el chat. I put the link into the Q&A chat. For me to read out the URL would be a very long URL, but
Yeah.
I think we can add that when you post this on the page of the New Bedford Light. People can make sure that they know what their rights are and that they tell people whom they know what their rights are. So there are many, many resources. The Massachusetts ACLU has information about your rights. People who work with immigrants at your workplaces, your friends, your neighbors, the parents at your kids' school, make sure that you know. If you see something, document it. Take note. Do what you can. Obviously, keep yourself safe. I mean, all kudos to Brad Lander for, walking the walk, but we don't want people to get detained and arrested unnecessarily. If you can volunteer, there's an organization, Bijan in Boston, that's the Boston Immigrant Justice Accompaniment Network that will accompany people to hearings that they have. If you can drive people to Boston, if you can help people concretely in any way, there are organizations. Clearly, CCT can always use volunteers. Another thing that we're doing is helping prepare families so that people, write up, do the paperwork, that they appoint somebody, because yes, we couldn't, knowing what his rights were, did not protect Juan Francisco Mendez, and luckily his wife was there able to take care of their child. But if someone is taken, or if both parents are taken, who is going to care for the kids? So people can prepare in advance. We hope that they don't ever need to put this into effect, but to write up a notarized statement that says, here is the person that I appoint to take care of my child. If anything happens, if they get into an accident, we don't want anybody's kids to end up in DCF unnecessarily.
Make plans ahead of time. And where are the GoFundMe pages?
It's GoFundMe. I can try to get I put it in the Q&A chat, but I can try to read out the URL if anybody want me to do that. You can ask Adrian to speak about it.
Adrian, is CCT a nonprofit that can raise money itself, or is that not how it works?
CCT is a nonprofit, and we do have a link. It's our website is cct-newbedford.org. And we do have a link there for donations to CCT. I'm not sure if the GoFundMe link is there. It might be. But yeah, CCT-New Bedford, all together, all lowercase.org is the organization's webpage.
Okay. Adrian, are there any final words you want to wrap up and tell our viewers?
Adrián, si tiene algunos pensamientos finales ahora es el momento.
Sí, y yo agradezco también sobre el GoFundMe. Hay más organizaciones que yo he visto, por ejemplo, Bedford, por ejemplo, CDC tiene un grupo, hay varios grupos aquí y yo invito a la gente que visiten CDC, Immigrant Center, los otros grupos, Lisa, que tenemos en Single, que también están recaudando fondos. Es muy importante que la gente apoya a estas organizaciones porque se enfocan más en inmigración que CST en laboral.
So it's definitely we thank you very much for this opportunity, and please do help us out with the donations. But it's also very important to remember that there are other organizations with a greater immigration focus than CCT, which has a more labor focus, who you could donate to. There's CEDC, there's the Immigrants Assistance Center, there's Mujeres Victoriosas. Please make sure you visit their pages and you help them out.
I want to thank you, Lisa Maya Knauer and Adrian Ventura, for being our guests and all the great information that you've given us today. I especially want to thank Kevin Andrade for your great reporting, but also the difficult job of translating long-winded people like us today.
Thank you.
The New Bedford Light is committed to doing in-depth coverage of this immigration issue, and we're going to stick with it.
Thanks.
Muchas gracias. Thank you. Gracias a todos.
Thanks for the opportunity, and thank you to all the people who are listening. It's really important that people inform themselves, and the New Bedford Light is doing a great job in helping people learn about the real context of what's going on.
All right.